Hi and welcome back to our analysis of Season 4 of Black Mirror. This time we're on Episode 5, Metalhead. And like I said before, this one is difficult to break down in quite the same way as others, because the main plot is fairly straightforward, but we're not given much to go on outside of that. There's no sort of clever little nods and winks that we go, oh, it's that, okay. A lot of it's either, we make these tiny jumps and, oh yeah, that's that, clearly. Or the polar opposite, we're having to make wild assumptions and a lot of guesswork, I suppose you could say. And that ambiguity is a choice. It's clearly baked into the episode, if you will. It's something that is there as a way to make us, I think, uneasy. We don't know what's going on. And even the people in the episode who have lived through it and know what's going on are unsure of what's going to happen minute to minute. So, in a way, that ambiguity helps us sort of be on a level, I think, with Bella and Tony and Clark and anyone else who's left at the camp, or wherever they're holed up. But we'll get onto the plot in a moment, because there is something else at play in this episode, itself perhaps indicative of ambiguity in some ways, and that's the stylistic choices. The most obvious of that being that it's in black and white. This has become something, I suppose, of like a visual vocabulary, a shorthand to evoke certain ideas, either arty flick kind of thing, or it's a nod back to an earlier time. Not that they're necessarily mutually exclusive, of course. But I think this is more evocative of the suspense films of, say, early Hitchcock, like Psycho. We can't see the colours and the nuances of the scene apart from in shades of grey. Again, like I said before, this is ambiguous, shades of grey. There is no definite. There may be moments of black and white, but most of it's in this middle ground, where it's just a darker grey or a lighter grey. I said before, it reminds me of Psycho, for example, and in that, we have a person's clothing colour changing throughout the piece. You can do a lot with black and white, and this episode does a lot with it. It marries it well with a great score, which I thought sounded really familiar. I thought originally it was just like, well, maybe it's because it's evocative of that kind of era of suspense thriller, but it's more than that. I've seen it before with black and white behind it, because it's Krzysztof Penderecki's Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, also used in Twin Peaks, and I've probably butchered his name entirely, but I'm sorry. But it is very evocative of that era. It's got the right feel to it, those stabbing, shrieking strings, all of those stings timed perfectly, as they are in this episode, give us that unease, give us that suspense thriller feeling, and it really helps the episode. I think if they'd have gone colour and a normal score, I don't think it would have been as effective. It's, even though it's really hard to break down, I didn't feel like it was hard to watch it again. It wasn't like, oh, I've got to sit through that. It was, okay, let's see what's going on here, and still getting the rush and the dread and all of the emotions that came with it. But I think that's a great way to segue into what's actually going on here. I mean, first of all, we have Maxine Peake in a kind of very serious role. Those of us in the UK may remember her as Twinkle from Dinner Ladies. Such a weird thing to kind of put those two next to each other. But it's often been said, if you want a good dramatic actor, look to the funny guy, or in this case, the funny woman. Because timing is everything in comedy, and drama relies on timing as well. It's just that people don't seem to make the connection as quickly. And conversely, people who are very good at dramatic can't necessarily do funny, because it's more than just timing. But the other way, it works very well. We see it a lot. And like I say, she does a great job. She's very believable and very easy to empathise and sympathise with. She's really the driving force for the whole narrative for us. We are living if you will, her last moments. As horrible as that is to think about, we are there with her as she's living her last day or so. And that's quite sad, but we really feel for her because of how well Maxine Peake does her job, so well done there. I'll stop, sort of praising her now. But like I say, the basic plot is very simple. It seems to be a post-apocalyptic world where these dog creatures have seem to wipe out most of humanity, and as we learn, other animals have not fared very well either. There's the whole pig conversation where they seem to have been wiped out. So it seems to be that the dogs are pretty indiscriminate. Do you have a pulse? You must die. Could be one way that they approach it. But it is, that they're going to this warehouse to get something for someone to ease their pain, if you will. Now, first thoughts is maybe it's medical supplies or something of the sort, medicine itself, because she does say there might be batteries in there. So my brain was like, well, could it be like a dialysis machine or something? Could it be like a medical warehouse? Maybe not that extreme, but those kind of ideas, medical equipment. And then obviously they go in. Tony and Clark end up dying, and she has to run away and escape from this one lone dog survivor that's hunting her down. Again, another idea of this suspense thriller. Someone running away from a relentless killing machine. And we just follow her as she tries to get away, making brief contact back home, just to say, look, I'll try and make it back. Tell Ali and Graham and Jack that I'm thinking of them, and again, those moments where the pathos is really delivered to us quite well. It could have been really heavy-handed and over the top, but it's done really well. I think it was measured and very well calculated. And of course, she goes and sort of flees the scene, tricks the dog creature after a while, sort of climbed up the tree, and she's kind of lucky that it couldn't climb the tree because of how it had sort of broken off one of its front paws. But she kind of gets it. I don't know if she was trying to just desensitize it to it or just drain the battery, because again, we don't know how long this has been going on. It could have been months, could have been years, could have only been weeks or days. Very unlikely for the amount of death and decimation that's happened, but we don't know. We don't have a definite time window. But whatever she was trying to do, she kind of succeeds and scarpers. And of course, sort of holes up in this place, sees the the people who basically chose their own way out with the shotgun. Very difficult scene, again, very well acted. And this again leads us into the how long has it been going on, because they're in a fair state of decomposition. They're almost like mummified, I would say, actually, with the sort of texture of the skin that we see. But that would surely happen over a long period of time. So maybe it's longer than we might initially think. But either way, she's on her way to kind of succeeding, but he ends up finding her. I say he, I don't know why I'm humanising him in that way. Ends up finding her, and she does bring him down, but not without great cost to herself. She gets a load more of these tracking shards in her, and yeah, at the end of it, she realises that I've got a choice here. They either take me down slowly and painfully, or I end it my way. And she does. She makes the choice. Arguably, you could say, at the end, she becomes the Metalhead with all the shards embedded in her face and neck, etc. But that might be a stretch. So the basic plot is very easy to follow. In most things, that's the case, But the ambiguity of this episode, as I keep saying, is what keeps it interesting for us. The dogs, where did they come from? It could have been something as inane, I guess, as like these robotic experiments that we're doing throughout the world, sort of pushing the limits of what we can do, and they just rebel. It's particularly a dog-shaped one that keeps getting pushed over to show how it can right itself, etc. Very similar to a scene that we do see in this, that just passed on somehow generationally in new versions. Yeah, these guys will screw you over, so take them out. It's kind of sounds really silly, but it's feasible, because we're not given an answer that says it's not. Likewise, it could have been, say, if the Justice Park idea was taken to the next level, where they're actually sort of torturing and killing, and a few escaped, and their programming was just kill the humans, because maybe at that point any people in the park were walled off, so they could, they weren't in the middle, so it was literally just programmed to kill humans you see. They escape, or a few of them escape, then go, wait a minute, there's more out here, I'll go and get my brothers out, as it were. Entirely feasible, because we're not told that that's not the case. All that we're told is that they've decimated humanity, and they've taken out pigs as well, and probably other life. So, anything's possible. And like I say, the timing, it could have been a short time, it could have been ages. The fact that, I don't know if they are solar powered or whatever, I don't know how their power is done, but the fact that, cars are still running and there's still fuel in them means that it can't have been too long, but it's certainly long enough to make humanity and other animals really on the brink of extinction. But I think there's a couple of sort of interesting things of this episode that I do kind of want to finish up on. And in this episode that really has not much levity and fun, there is, obviously, in the early part of the episode, the sort of car journey where mints come back, strangely enough, after Crocodile. Seemingly, Bella's the only one who likes them. But like she says, they're the only thing left. And they have the conversation about the lack of pigs. And we get a really interesting idea about equality. When they're talking about how, sort of their noses are the same.
Snow.
Sorry?
Pigs have snouts, not noses.
Sorry, their snouts are the same height as their beehole. It's like, what kind of society is that? And Bella has the best answer.
An equal one?
In an episode that really isn't touching on equality in any way, shape or form, at least that we can easily derive, it has one of the best analogies to equality I've ever actually heard, that I think I will borrow for future use. But another quick interesting element, not really one of the ones I was originally going to end with, but I found the way the dogs saw, I suppose, was very intriguing, because it seems they've got like a composite of different things. I would say there's a lot of echolocation in there, because we see the pulses, and it's very much like a topographical map, kind of all like a sonar system would do. It would only give sort of topographical data, it wouldn't give the nuances, and we never see sky detail, so they don't seem to see in the normal way. But then there are the blood drops, which I don't think would show up quite that well in just a normal echolocation. So maybe there's like spectrometers and that kind of thing, where it can kind of analyse blood samples live on the fly. This shows how technologically advanced these things are. But it does lead to that very interesting idea where she pours the paint over, and assuming that the locator sound is coming from the front primarily, because it does always seem to face where it's going to do those pulses, then it does still make sense that would blind it. And I love the fact that the sound dropped out, again reinforcing this idea that echolocation is a big part of its visual information gathering tool, I guess. That's kind of a big part of how it uses or how it sees the world. And just quickly also, everyone's a critic. Stabbing the speakers playing Golden Brown, naughty. So as much as I don't like to end on a low note, I've said it many a time, I do want to finish off with the fact that we do learn what was in box, or the box labelled 95DY42. It was a bunch of teddy bears. Whether they're white or not, I'm not sure. I did say last time it could have been a link back. But this is, the joy of grayscale. It could be grey, it could be a light yellow, it could be white. But either way, all of the sadness and pain and misery and death in this episode. 3 people died that we saw in this episode. For a teddy bear. Again, it speaks to their good nature. They care, or Bella cares particularly. But it's really sad. And like I said, I don't want to end on a low note, but it just really brings the rest of the episode into perspective. That they're willing to do this for a kid. Says a lot about them. A lot of bad things happen in the world, and a lot of bad people do live in it. And some of those people, you know, are in business, sometimes in the medical profession. And we'll get to see the comeuppance of one of those people next time. So I do hope you join me for the last episode of this run as we look at Black Museum. So until then, as always, take care.